It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. First up on our Wire special, Wendell Pierce and Andre Royo, two actors from the show. If you haven't seen the show, first off, come on, it's 2018. I know that I'm a guy at a party haranguing you about this, but watch The Wire. Anyway, basically, it is about Baltimore. The cops, the drug dealers, the dock workers, the politicians, the journalists, the systems they work in, and the very human reasons that those systems don't function the way that they're supposed to. And in an ensemble cast of dozens, Andre Royo and Wendell Pierce both stood out. Take Bunk, Wendell's character. He's funny, he's a loyal friend, a dangerous drunk, and really, really clever. In one scene, he convinces a suspect that a photocopier is a lie detector.
We'll start with an easy one. Is your name, in fact, Deshaun Fredericks?
Yeah.
True. And do you reside, in fact, the 1200 block of Woodyer Street in West Baltimore?
Yeah.
True. And did you and Monell shoot your boy Pookie down on Carey Street just like Monell said you did?
Nah, no.
Lie.
The machine is never wrong, son.
Then there's Bubbles, played by Royo. Bubs, as he's known, is a heroin addict. He's also a reliable informant for the police. And as the show goes on, he gets more and more complex. You meet his family, his friends, you see into his world. He hits bottom and he manages to come out to see the other side.
Ain't no shame in holding on to grief. As long as you make room for other things too. It's all right. So thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me share.
I talked with Wendell and Andre a decade ago when The Wire was still on TV. Back then, we recorded the show in the apartment, so if you hear a phone ring, that's an actual phone. It's just like The Wire. It's my commitment to verisimilitude. Anyway, here goes. My interview with Wendell Pierce and Andre Royo, recorded in 2008.
If you walk through the garden, you better watch your back.
I want to ask you guys what you thought of the show when you were very first cast, before you even did a table read. When you got the part and you saw the script, what did you think of it?
Well, first of all, when I first found out even about the audition of a character named Bubbles that I found out was going to be a junkie, I was very hesitant to even go into the audition. I felt like I didn't think that we were still, creating characters like this. Coming from a great character that Chris Rock did with Pookie and Sam Jackson with Gator, when you just hear you're playing a junkie named Bubbles, I was like, I don't know if I want to, start my career off that way. Then I realized I was starting my career off, and I had to do what I got to do to get it going. And when I got the part, we love to work, man. And once you get a job, you think that you're gonna go on the set and you're gonna, make sure that the talent shines above anything else. And when I met David Simon and Bob Colesbury, one of my late producers, they sat down and talked to me, and you just got a sense from them that this was not gonna be just some old cop show. It was gonna be more than entertaining. It was gonna be more than educational. It was gonna be a certain type of movement. They had a message and a voice that they wanted to get across, and you kind of believed it. And when I got there for the table read and saw the other cast members, certain people that I recognized from, running around and grinding out in New York, I just felt kind of special. When I read the pilot, me personally, I thought, well, this is a cop show that an audience already has an idea of what cop shows are supposed to be like. I didn't think the audience was going to pick up on it. I thought it was a lot of talk. Everybody from the cops to the robbers to the political, everybody was just talking. There was no great sex scenes and no heads were getting blown off like I thought was going to happen on cable. So I was nervous. I was like, this is not going to make it. Don't quit your day job. Let's get that money for the pilot and keep it moving.
I imagine living in New York that you must have, there's all these cop shows that shoot in New York, that's sort of been the thing. And I imagine being black, being tall and skinny, like you just kind of get called in for these sort of one episode, criminal guy that confesses in the end, junkie informant that informs on people kind of role.
Yeah, you can't have a cop show that's realistic without some black guy going to jail, coming from jail, or being in jail. I mean,
confessing.
It's gotta be that way, and you kind of understand that as a black actor. You know there's certain roles that you're gonna come into in the beginning of your game, and realize that you're gonna take, and hope that, like I said, that the talent kind of stands up or stands out a little bit more than the character you're playing. And with this show, it was just more than talent. It was just the writing. The writing just stood out and told all the actors in our hearts that it ain't about, us. This is about Baltimore. It's about the story. And we all just, fell into just being real and trying to get the story to, reach a lot of people's hearts.
What about you?
Especially, well, when I first got the script, I knew it was going to be something very different because the humanity in the script, how people were dealing with each other. And, I had the same concerns that Andre had, which is, wow, people were so accustomed to, 10 minutes and then an explosion, 10 minutes and then a sex scene. I was saying that they were really making this leap of faith about, that we trust that the audience is intelligent enough and will, that they will step up to the show. And even when we first saw the first viewing of a rough cut, we were all nervous, like, wow, maybe
this is real.
This is real slow, and all right, well, we got the pilot money, so back to the grind. But that was the thing that David and Robert were trusting of, that the audience was dying to see something of true depth, and that they would come to it. And David himself says it's not viewer friendly. First couple of episodes, you're like, okay, it's setting stuff up, but what's going to happen?
How long is it going to take?
And then it becomes almost addictive. But I don't want to. The writing is great. The writing is absolutely fantastic, and you never see the humanity given to these characters before. So that black guy, that stock stereotype that you see in other television shows, is not appearing on The Wire, and that's the writing. And also, I have to give it to Andre and. Especially everybody,
yeah.
But especially the guys on the street, because they've given the humanity to cops. You see their humanity, you see their stories, you've seen their families before. Even though the writing for us also is very different because we're so flawed. There's an ambiguity of morality when it comes to everyone. But, people brought so much humanity to the roles that you can never see a kid with a long tee and some baggy pants and ever look at him in the same light again. Just like, oh, he's just a drug dealer. He's just a junkie. He's just a kid hustling, And also when you're stopped by the cop, never just assume this superiority sort of complex. He has it together. He does everything perfectly. He's going to be respectful of me. These are flawed people. So when I first read it, I thought this is going to be something different. When I did the table read and saw the talent attached, then I said, man, I knew it was going to be special. And even before we started shooting, I remember one night we all just got together for drinks and were hanging out in the hotel room. And people were just like, listen, man, don't let me, I don't want to drop the ball. I want to be there. It was like this team meeting. Yeah. Like, we're going to do something special. And then when it came together, then the payoff has just been profoundly moving.
When you're an actor in a television series, you have this one character who's one piece of a much larger puzzle, right? Mm-hmm. When did you first get a sense of the scope of the series, like not just on the small scale, but even on the big scale, the way that this,
It wasn't until after it aired for me, because David, all the producers were very, 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 very committed to not letting us in. Yeah. Not giving us a head start of where the story is going or where the character arc is going to happen, because they didn't want the actors to come up with some preconceived way of playing it. At times it became frustrating. I remember when I was chasing the gun in the third season, I was just like, what is this about? Where is this going? And the payoff was wonderful, but, while I was doing it, I was just so frustrated, watching all these other great storylines happening. I'm like, and I'm chasing a gun, So, you didn't, for me, it didn't see the payoff until after, and then you're like, man, all the pieces come together. As we have this expression, all the pieces matter, all the pieces fit.
Yeah, there's certain things that will happen as far as the full scope of the show. You're so close to it. You're shooting, and like Wendell said, we're so busy helping out each other, making sure we're all on top of our game, making sure we're being as true to the character as possible. It's hard to really remove ourselves and take a bird's eye view in the big scheme of the show. I know there's certain moments, like when Lester Freeman, says, Clark Peters says, all the pieces matter. There's certain lines that really resonated to me. Well, this show is something really different and really heavy. When Bubbles' character was trying to get clean, and I'm talking to Kima, Sonia Sohn, and I ask her, help me out to get clean, and she goes, well, what am I gonna do with a clean snitch? That kind of really resonated to me. Like, wow, they just really want to get the informant and get the case. They really don't care, or they do care, but they have other agendas, and it's so many things rush through your head that you realize this show is telling so many different stories and so many different layers that you just, you look at it and go, this show is big. Like, I hope everybody can catch all these different nuances and all these different storylines, at once, and you're not sure. Like we said, we're used to watching a cop show, and at the end of the hour, the criminal usually, puts his hands up and waits for the cuffs, to come on. And in this one, it doesn't happen. We keep moving, and everybody keeps going at it, and it kind of really has a complete ending. It's just a continuing crime happens, crime goes on, and this is the story of these people and what they do to try to help, better the community. After it aired, I remember the Daily News and the Post, they gave us like half a star. They were like, it's too dense. We couldn't understand, half the dialogue. There's too many storylines. The show thinks it's a book. And I remember running into David's office, like, yo, they hate us. We gotta blow some heads up, or show somebody's butt like NYPD. So we can show a lot more. We on cable. So
right.
Let's do something. And he just sat there with his feet on the desk and reading the paper and was like, don't worry, they'll come around. And he really believed that his stories and his message would not have to be dumbed down. That the audience would revel in, paying attention and getting the story. And once you watch The Wire and you get the story, you kind of feel good that you're paying attention, that you're getting it.
And it goes across the board, It's just the demographics. You couldn't put your finger on a Wire fan, It's rich and poor, black and white, young and old. And like anything of real specialness, they always feel as though they're the only ones who really understand it. A real Wire fan is someone who goes, man, I wish everybody could understand and appreciate it as much as I do. And as we go around the country and all, we get to hear all the fans that we have, and that's very special. That's very special when people feel as though it's speaking personally to them. And David always trusted that people love to read, and I'm gonna make a novel for television. Something that you can go back to over the years and pick up pieces over and over, because it's going to be so layered, and all the different chapters you can go back to and actually trust that you can reference something from 2 years back and still have it appeal to someone, 2 years ahead.
When I actually bought the chair that I'm sitting in, I bought it on Craigslist, and I went to this guy's house here in Hollywood to buy this chair, right? And I get there, and I'm just gonna give him the money to buy a chair, and he's wearing this T-shirt that says "Elect Frank Sabatka," and I was like, "Frank Sabatka?" I was like, "Is that a Wire T-shirt?" And he's like, "Yeah, I make them myself." And this guy was like, he was like a Hollywood writer. I asked him what he did. He was like a writer that didn't write on The Wire, and he just had that really intense personal connection to the show enough that this grown man, I mean, he was like 35, was making T-shirts themed upon with like iron-on letters and whatnot.
And we have a lot of writers who, they would love to write on The Wire, and they're big fans of the show. And we've been hired because of the show on different shows, and have the writers come down to set, which is a rarity. Writers stay up in the room, and the writers come down to set and say, "I just wanted to meet you. Can I call you Bunk this week?" I'm like, "Of course you can." But we have a lot of big fans of the show because they see that David. And all the writers on the show have this freedom that they don't, because network television is so formulaic. Even the actors know it. We had this expression that if you're on Law and Order, you're gonna confess. If you're on Law and Order, you're gonna be found guilty. If you're on NYPD Blue, you're gonna confess. And so everybody.
I did an episode of Law and Order one time, like after the third season, and it was so funny because I've done it before The Wire, and you get the little what's called a little room, and you sit in the room and you wait till you get on set. You get on set and you do your job, and it's good. Thanks for coming, bounce. Now, I get this honey wagon, and the writers are coming down, and the people are really excited to see me come on set. And there was one scene where Chris North and his partner come in, and I have a gun in the apartment, and when they come in, I see the hallway is clear. I know the cops are coming, so I ran. and they yell, cut, and the writer come over to me and he goes, listen, on our show, we're not as smart as The Wire. Just put your hands up. Don't try to run. We ain't got no other scenes where they chasing you. When the cops come to your house, you normally you get mad, you yell, and you put your hands up and you wait for the handcuffs. And I was like, oh, okay, that's how you do it over here. I got a little cocky, but it's so amazing. When you see certain people, like certain writers. If I go on a lot, writers, I don't even know their names, and they just come up to me and introduce themselves and say, yo, your show was so fantastic, your show was so great, and you forget sometimes, even after I watch the show and I know it's good, you kind of forget who your audience is, I'm so used to a certain type of audience coming like, yo, I love that scene, with the drug dealers and everything, I see somebody like Cornel West. I'm a little nervous to go say hi to him, and he comes running up to me. Hey, yo, I love you, Bubs. I love your show.
No.
It's kind of an amazing feeling. You never know how many people you reach when you're doing something good.
And I'm also a fan of the show. Fortunately for me, I'm sort of like this satellite where, I come in contact with the different storylines, but I'm basically at, homicide in the office, and then I go out to the site. So I never really have scenes, or ever, rare to have scenes with a lot of people on the streets. So I get to go to the set and watch it. I get to watch, as a fan. I've even read the script. I know what's going to happen. But, I sit there when I saw, Andre, when he discovers that, he may have been responsible for that kid's death, just as a fan, as a fan of the show, as a fan of acting, to see someone come and bring that level of chops, you sit there and you go, and I knew Andre Royo in New York, on the grind too, and so I just really appreciate it. I know, I'm not blowing smoke, man. That's the thing that I really sit back and get to appreciate, and you forget that they're on the same show with you because you don't have scenes with them, and you get to appreciate it as a fan and then go, yeah, I am on the show with them, Yeah, so it's a very
cast,
special thing.
It's a big cast. You see everybody, and you don't realize, because like Wendell said, we shoot our scenes. 18-hour days. Sometimes we just go home, we're tired. Mm-hmm. So you don't really see everybody shooting. If Bubbles doesn't get arrested, I don't know what the cops are doing.
Right.
So like same when I watched him and Dominic West. The first season, when they had that scene when they solved the case and they only used the word, the F word.
Yeah.
That was amazing, man. I use the F word all the time. It never has that kind of weight.
Yeah. I thought about playing that scene, and I'm like, wait a minute, no, I can't do that. Because it would just sound like beep.
That changed for me. That was when you saw that on television, it kind of changed the writing, level of writing to a different place. Like Mammoth, like Shakespeare. It was like to use that word and do a whole scene with it was beautiful. And now you can't take those kind of risks on network television, and just seeing him with Omar. There's so many characters that you just you don't have scenes with, but when you're watching on TV, even like you say, even after you read the script, you're just amazed. You're like, wow. You forget. You're like, oh, that's my show. I'm on that show too. When I pop up, I'm like, oh, I forgot I was on this show too. Wow. Because, all the actors brought it. I think, what's great about Baltimore, which is one of the best things about, the show, is shooting in Baltimore and it being about Baltimore, and David Simon making sure that they bring regular people from the streets within the scene. It kind of made all the actors say, you know what, let's step this up. Let's bring our best. Let's bring our A game. And, it became fun.
One of the things that David Simon cares so much about the show is that authenticity. It's not necessarily like exact literal verisimilitude. Like it's still a television program. You can still only have so many main characters, for example. But there's this core authenticity that is basically... it's almost the premise of the show. You talked about it as humanity, like that these characters are humane no matter who they are. And I think it's one of the reasons why so many different types of people respond to the show. I wonder if that feels like a burden on you guys as actors, that that, for example, when I saw your character on TV, Andre, and, started coming back, like, it was like, I grew up in a neighborhood with plenty of junkies, and sweater vest that I'm wearing right now, notwithstanding. That was the first time I ever saw somebody that was portrayed in that way humanely, and I can't imagine what it would have been like that if I had what it would have been like for me if I had myself been a junkie or in recovery. You know what I mean? Like. That feels like it must be in some ways a burden, or at least a concern, that you feel like you have to represent people in a whole way.
I feel this is, I can't speak for Andre. I feel as though the burden is happening now, that it's over for us. The writing was so rich. It feeds on itself. The writing and the acting was so rich, and the community that we created and the world that we created it so strong that it induced all this wonderful behavior and moments and stuff. So it fed upon yourself. I mean, I remember actually this one scene I had with Andre where he was getting beat up by a cop in the first season. He was getting beat up by a cop. So I can't walk in the room and say, how am I going to play it? I just had to be there and react and try to save him. The level of the work was such that now, as I go out on calls and read this episodic sort of expositional, just
two-dimensional characters.
The burden is now, because before I think we created a forum and a place to work where people had the freedom to have leaps of faith, and then the game just went to another level.
Yeah, it was just I don't look at it as a burden. It almost became like an honor, because there's so many characters like we've been speaking about that aren't told in its purest way. It's told one two-dimensional. Let's just get the story done. Let's just get to the ending of the show and the bang at the end. So when I was in Baltimore and we was hanging out, I was hanging out with junkies and guys were hanging out with cops. We saw humanity. We saw these guys talk and have passion, and have anger, and have empathy, all rolled up in one. We saw the real people, and so now we have a chance to play these people. It would be silly for us to say, okay, I'm just gonna play this one part. I'm just gonna be this real hard cop all the way through, or I'm gonna be this real comedic, skeevy junkie all the way through. That kind of just kind of cuts into just being artistic. If you want to do it, you want to do it right. I think David Simon, I heard him talking one time, and that was the one thing he said. When they asked him, what do you want them to say to you when this is all said and done? What do you want somebody to say to you about The Wire? And he was like, that I got it right. Not that it was great, not that, we got all these awards or people thought we were the best show. Just that, when somebody walks up to me and says, you playing my life, though. I was that guy at one point, and you did it right. A cop goes, when he got there, we asked cops, how they feel. They were like, yo, don't play us this way. Or don't make sure you don't do this. We don't all be doing showing our butts. It ain't about who we sleeping with, And we were like, okay.
I think they probably do all show their butts.
They
at some
probably
point.
do.
Yeah.
Right. But the funny part was,
joking around.
When we started showing how hard it was to solve a case, how a lot of things, red tape gets involved, and how some cops do get frustrated. And you saw the cops when they aired, nobody was mad. All the cops was like, yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. That's how
I literally was terrified of the real Bunk. I went out with him. We hung out. I talked to him, stuff like that. And one time, the first season, he came to the set, and in the distance, I saw him get out the car, kind of cock his head and put on a scowl, and I was like, and looking at what I was doing, and I was like, oh man, I'm not nailing it. I'm not. He has issues with it. So I was literally, for the past couple of years, would only, every once in a while talk on the phone, send a note, send it through mutual friends. And then someone said, hey, man, Bunk is retiring. I said, yeah, I know. So I have to go. So I go to the retirement party, and he's like, he looked at me like the lost son, There he is. And he was just so appreciative, man. Thank you for what you did for me. Everyone, you made me feel special, And I said, man, you didn't need to do that. Look at your career. He said, but you nailed it, You nailed it. And that was the payoff. That was my award. I don't need anything else, That the real Bunk at his retirement party embraced me like a son,
Yeah, people would just really respect and appreciate honesty. We all know we have different sides of ourselves, but once you see somebody playing or portraying what you do or who you are on screen, you just want it to be honest. You don't want it to be glorified. You don't want to be belittled. You just, you want to be able to look at them, like looking in the mirror and say, these are my flaws, these are my good points, and, this guy did a great job. I walked into Barnes & Nobles when I first came out in L.A., and this woman came up to me and said, I love what you do on the show, and I have to say, I can never look at another homeless person in the same way. You made me feel for them, because normally, growing up in New York, you walk past them, and you don't even have any judgment about them. You just ignore them. They don't exist. They're invisible, and we have to step back and go, they're human beings. And when somebody said that to me, that was my award. That was my honor. Like, wow, I didn't know, or I forgot that television has that kind of impact. It ain't just to sit back and forget your problems. It's also an awareness to show you where the problems lie. And I thought that was fantastic. and I think Baltimore has been a great help with that. I have there's one scene where, I'm about to steal this copper off this truck and I'm smoking a cigarette, and when the copper truck pulls out, I throw the cigarette away, and me and Johnny go, hit the truck and steal a copper. The director yells cut, and this guy comes to me and goes, yo, we never throw out our cigarettes, man. You keep the filter, put it in your sock or something. And I was like, all right, cool, we gotta reshoot that. Let's reshoot that. And it's those little things that they want you to do it right. They're not embarrassed by it. They just saying, hey, if you're gonna do it, portray me in the right way. To let people know that I'm here. And I think that's brilliant, man.
Let me ask you guys this: when I was preparing for this interview, I read this long article that ran in the Times a long time ago, in between The Corner and The Wire, that was mostly about the article was basically about how Charles S. Dutton, who had directed The Corner, and David Simon, who co-created it or created it and co-wrote it, they had very different ideas about the way that the racial dynamics played out in creating the show and how it played out on the set and so on and so forth. And one of the things that Charles S. Dutton said was, and I copied and pasted it to my computer so I could say it, he said, I know that David Simon can visit and sit with as many black folks in the city as he wants to. They can pay the families to get the stories. They can listen and walk around with dope fiends. They can write about murders, and they still won't know a damn thing about black people. Not this, this, indicating his self and who he is. He says, I know the pulse of this. I know what people think the minute they walk out of the doors. I know what mothers feel when their sons and daughters walk out of the house to go to school. I know what it feels like to kill somebody. I know what it feels like to get shot. I know what it feels like that people are looking to kill me. I don't have to show up as a crime journalist after the fact. And there's this, he obviously one of the most powerful speakers in the world, Charles S. Dutton. You could hardly ask for a more brilliant guy, or a guy who speaks with more gravitas on this subject.
Right.
He's a guy who was in prison for manslaughter, among other things. Did that ever occur to you that you're shooting this show in Baltimore, which is a city that's one of the things that came up is Charles S. Dutton saying Baltimore is a city that's 2/3 black, and the cast of the show is roughly 2/3 black, I'd say, maybe even more.
A little more, yeah.
Did you ever have to deal with those issues in your head about the fact that this is obviously the whole staff of the writing staff of The Wire isn't white, but that this is coming from a white guy who's looking at this through very indirect experience?
Well, I feel as though, first of all, no matter how wonderfully you portray something, how close you get to it, how much you nail it and all the accolades that we give on the show, the people who live it ultimately are the experts on it. They will know it, no matter what story it is. They are living it, and we are only portraying it, and we try to be as truthful in our portrayal of it. I also tell people who have issues with the show and have issues with the fact that here you have white creators trying to tell predominantly black stories, that never lose your ability to be offended, because that keeps people's feet to the fire, that keeps people on their toes, that keeps challenging David and any other writers that come to a story. Don't lose the ability to be offended.
I read you mentioning that in an interview as something that Jesse Jackson said to you on the set of Get on the Bus.
We were actually rehearsing for Get on the Bus, and it was at the time they were protesting the lack of black representation in the Oscar nominations, and actually when he said that was the one thing that really struck me. And I said, that's a vigilance that we should always have, never to be offended, never lose the ability to be offended, because it keeps people on their toes, So saying, well, wait a minute, I don't mean to offend. And, they actually go check and recheck of who they are and why they're coming to it and writing it all. Because the opposite of loving something is not hating it, it's indifference, If you don't care, then we've really reached a point where we're destroying it. So, and we've had our issues too over the past 5 years. I'll never forget one thing that really grabbed me, and Sonia Son especially brought it to David's attention. When David mentioned, we asked him about someone's murder, and he says, well, why would you do that? And he said, well, there's no hope. and we all took great offense to that. If there was no hope, you wouldn't even have a cast here.
Yeah.
All the stuff that the people we've gone through. So don't. How dare you say that? I mean, and I remember Sonya brought it to my attention, and it was something that. She had every right to say, and she knows, she really got on David about that. We took issue with that. And so it's a constant checks and balance, that should go on. So I'm glad that the debate is constantly tabled, that it's constantly on the table, so that we will never take for granted the way we portray people who have gone through what no one should go through. An underclass that was created by institutions and individuals, that people who have been victimized. So that's I embrace what Charles is saying, because that's where it comes from.
There's another side to what he's said, which was that even in the moments where he felt like there was nothing wrong, where it felt real and true, it also scared him a little bit or upset him a little bit, because he felt like he was giving something away. That he was like, that by doing this, I think he, I can't remember the analogy that, I can't remember the analogy he drew, but it was someone who had,
you don't have that analogy posted to your computer?
No, I should have saved that analogy. But it was a moment in which, gosh, I think maybe he said it was Dionne Warwick had left a production of an August Wilson play. Maybe it was Fences or something like that, because she felt like it was so real, and that the people that it was being presented to were white people, and it was like I think the word she said was, it's like they're giving away our secrets, or something like that. Do you ever have that feeling?
I never had that feeling. And I'm not as well into the game and politics and all that stuff, so I don't want to. Wendell Pierce is the man to really answer these type of questions. But I will say, I never felt, I never felt like we were giving any secrets away on this show. I mean, I never really. I mean, it was a social and a class type of story, poor and rich. People who got mad and say, "Oh, they're betraying blacks as junkies and as drug dealers," and I was like, "Yeah, but we got black lieutenants and we got a black mayor," and I thought we had a pretty good balance of positive. I mean, and even the positive had negative sides to them. So I just thought we were just telling a story. I think Charles Dutton is 100% right. As far as, will David have any kind of sense of what it is to be black? No, not at all. But he does have a sense of, being in Baltimore and talking about the community that he knows and what he feels is wrong with the community and what he feels the problems are. And I thought that's what we were talking about. I thought we were just talking about the destruction of this community that happens to be, mostly black. But it's the same problems in certain poor white communities. And
then also, to get your points across, you always, the more specific you are, the more universal your themes become. There was this little socialite that I met in New Orleans recently who come down, who was talking about The Wire, and she's talking about how she really didn't get into the show, and everybody kept talking about how great, and then all of a sudden the kids came on.
That's right.
And immediately she was just like, I know kids.
Everybody care about
and
kids.
She knew. Everything became so clear to her, because the humanity in childhood and the evolution of childhood and coming of age, that was the thing in the fourth year that just impacted. I think that's why even more people came on board, because the coming of age story in childhood is so universal. Theirs became specific. Ours was, is someone going to turn and go into the trade or not? Is as much as, it's a profound thing to someone who never even faced those choices, who may have been, their choices may have, can I ask the pretty girl out to the dance? But they understood immediately what those choices had to be and how devastating they can be for them, you know.
The
And so,
influence.
yeah, the influence.
Of the outside world.
The more specific you are, the more universal it becomes. I think that people's reaction to, are they giving our secrets away, comes from a historic perspective. You know, everything that African Americans and people of color have contributed to the human discourse has always been stolen. You know, we go back to the Greeks. You know what I'm saying? There's some people that believe, I think it's Socrates, really didn't exist. It was actually this African cat that Plato got most of his stuff from, and then created his great teacher. You do the research and figure out.
I told you he gets real deep. I told you.
So, you know, I mean, you know, Duke Ellington even said, you know, they were sitting around and said, why do we call this jazz? We should call it Negro music, and no white dude would ever want to be the king of it. You know? So what happens is that humanity has been, and our contributions to the human discourse, just like our contributions to what we're talking about in Western civilization, has never been accredited to us. And so when people see that, they go, there's that fear. Well, maybe we shouldn't have said that. Maybe we shouldn't have exposed ourselves, because also it's been manipulated, you know. Everyone now loves Muhammad Ali. Everyone. I remember when people were like, Frazier, kill him. Kill that communist. You know,
right.
I mean, they hated him. They hated Muhammad Ali. So there's revisionist history. I live in the South, where you go on the tour of the plantations, they don't discuss slavery. They literally say the house was built in 1832, and when the Smith family from New Orleans bought it in 1930, you'd be like, hold it. You just skipped a whole generation. You know, or the servants stood over here. When you say servants, you mean slave, right? Yeah. You know, I remember one time I was on a tour, and the people would turn to me after everything she said because I challenged her so much. They're like, well, is that right? You know, I'm like telling people about the whistle walk. What's that? Yeah, we had to whistle with the food coming from the kitchen to make sure we weren't eating it. That's why it's called a whistle walk. But now people thought the whistle walk garden and plantations is someone, oh, the flowers are so pretty, let me whistle, you know? So, and that's what people are responding to. But we should never be afraid. We should never be afraid to be private in public, because that's what art is all about, especially acting. Great art is to be private in public, you know, and that's when they tap into that authenticity that Mr. Dutton was talking about and in August Wilson plays. That's where that fear comes from, you know, like, oh my goodness. But it's the best explanation of who we are and our humanity that is undeniable. So it's the best defense against someone stealing our creativity.
I want to ask each of you guys some things that are sort of separate from each other. The themes of the city of Baltimore, I know, are particularly resonant for you, Wendell, because you're from New Orleans, a city that had a lot of the same problems that Baltimore has even before there was a devastating hurricane.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about how the themes are particularly resonant for you as a New Orleanian.
Yeah, New Orleanian. It's the same socioeconomic things that are happening. You know, a black city surrounded by a poor black city surrounded by affluent white suburbs, where people come into this great port, make their money, and aren't forced civically to pay that city for the riches that they bring. So they take it out in Baltimore, they call it the county, and then they build up these wonderful neighborhoods and go, oh, they look back at the city and go, oh, why is it such in poor shape? It's awful. I said, but you came to my house every day, made your money, and didn't even leave a tip on the dresser, you know, slept with my wife, drank my food, and split, you know. That's exactly what New Orleans is all about, you know. They look at the city and see how poor it is, and you know, they spend so much time lobbying against any education reform, you know, privatized prisons. You know, you can literally call the sheriff and have two guys come and cut your lawn for $1.50 an hour, you know, in any parish in Louisiana. Privatized prison. So, you know, you see the politics that are set up to keep an underclass because it's modern day slavery. You know, culturally, a bar on every corner and a church on every other, which is so New Orleans and so Baltimore, you know. And a rich cultural city like that, and I think it comes from the fact that it's a port city. You know, they love to party, like New Orleans likes to party, or maybe we just like to party in the cast because we we certainly party. So and the politics of keeping it underclass because so many people benefit from it. I saw those similarities in New Orleans.
Coming from the Bronx, you know, I never really heard about Baltimore, and when I did hear about it, it was just like this little city that people just forgot. I mean, most of my boys and people I knew, you either go to D.C. or you go to New York. And so there's a place in the middle that just people drove by. And it felt like when I got out there, you know, I've seen projects before, but this felt a little different. This felt like there was no sense of, you know, people being looked after or the abandonment issue was really strong out there. And it amazed me, you know, because not that we felt that much in the Bronx, but in the Bronx, you know, there were certain moments where we were talked about our name buzzed, and when hip-hop came out and everything, we kind of buzzed, and then all of a sudden, Manhattan became so big of a place to be that when people talk about New York, they really just talking about Manhattan. They're not talking about the Bronx, they're not talking about Queens, but they're just talking about Manhattan. So, you know, there's a sense of abandonment in a lot of projects in the Bronx where, you know, you just don't feel like people care about it. And I think that's what resonated with me in Baltimore. So that was the things that kind of connected me more and more with the character and with the streets and with the show itself.
When you walk through the garden.
Andre Royo and Wendell Pierce from 2008. You can see Andre Royo on the Fox series Empire. Wendell just played Detective Lee Tucker on Unsolved: The Murders of Tupac and the Notorious B.I.G.